Introduce our speaker.
It's very much my honor to represent the speaker. David Cobb is a lawyer, as I'm a lawyer, but he's been a very active citizen his entire life. He used his law practice to sue polluters. He's been involved and is now involved in the kind of issues that are most critical in this country. Corporate power, the environment, and democracy. All of those things are central in our country, and he's been and is central in all of those fights. Well, one of the things that sort of struck me that was kind of mentioning and looking at David's bio was, a lot of us know that George Bush really lost his election and they cheated in Florida. And then in 2004, John Kerry made a promise. He says, I'm going to raise money for a special fund. And if they cheat, I'm going to fight and I'm not going to roll over. I may be off on this, but I believe he had $14 million in that fund. When they cheated in Ohio, he rolled over. They didn't use any money and didn't fight. David asked for a recount in Ohio and started the fight there. So he's someone who I'm very proud to introduce because he's out there fighting in every place that we need someone to fight. He's now living in Humboldt County, which is leading in the election integrity by getting scanning at the ballots, and I'm very honored that you're there, and you're on the steering committee of the Democracy Committee in Humboldt County, so it's my pleasure to introduce you, David.
Thank you so much. So, my grandfather was a Baptist preacher, so my voice tends to project. It would be my preference to be able to talk to y'all without the need for a microphone, but I want to make sure. Can y'all hear me? Chloe in the back? Can y'all hear me over on this side? Can I just get a nod or like this? So what I'm going to do then is actually turn this off. We will use it for the question and answer and discussion period. But it will free me up and will make me more comfortable, and I hope make this more of a conversation without the need of a microphone. As Bill said, my name is David Cobb. I like to say that I am a proud, I am a patriotic, and these days I am a pissed off American citizen. Good. I'm glad to get that kind of reaction because I will also self-identify as a political progressive. And as a political progressive, I think we've made a mistake by allowing the Tea Party to claim some sort of monopoly on political anger. Because you know what? If you engage a Tea Party supporter, just one human being to another, if you just talk to them, and I've done this time after time, almost universally, what you'll hear is what they're angry about is after the big banksters destroyed the economy of the United States, the federal government rewarded them with $1 trillion of our tax money. Well, you know what? I'm angry about that too, aren't you?
Yeah.
And I don't want the Tea Party to be the only place where that anger is expressed. But I want to go deeper, folks, because I'm also angry that 1 in 6 American families are living below the poverty level. And I don't hear that anger expressed at Tea Party rallies. I'm angry that 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 children are either hungry or undernourished in the richest country the world has ever seen, and I don't hear that anger expressed at Tea Party rallies. And I'm angry about the fact that the transnational corporations are destroying the planet that we all depend upon for life itself, and I don't hear that anger expressed at Tea Party rallies. Oh! And I'm angry that they are creating a racist, sexist, and class-oppressive world order with the plunder. And I damn sure don't hear that anger expressed at Tea Party rallies. And may I say the anger I'm describing, the anger that I feel, the anger that so many of you share with me, our anger is a righteous anger. And I use that word very carefully. I am the grandson of a Baptist preacher. I know what the word righteous means, and I recognize that we're in a Unitarian Universalist church. Or, as my grandfather would say, Unitarian church is sort of like a church. Very similar. You know what, folks? I'll be honest, about 20-25% of the presentations I do across this country, I am welcomed and so honored to be at Unitarian churches. Literally, union halls, Unitarian churches, community centers, etc. That's where I've been speaking. And may I just say, Unitarians love that joke all across this country. And I love Unitarians for loving that joke. I mean, it really does sort of, I think, speak well of the spirit of the Unitarians. But the reality is, the word righteous is an important word, and it's wrought with significance. And I do believe our anger is righteous because righteous anger is unique. See, if you just get mad because you don't get your way, that ain't righteous. Righteous anger can only be provoked by anger at injustice, oppression, or exploitation. Righteous anger is unique in what has provoked it. But folks, I'll go deeper. I'll tell you this. If you get mad and angry at injustice, oppression, but all you ever do is stew and wallow in it, that's not righteous either. Righteous anger requires action. And saying it that way, we acknowledge it was righteous anger that propelled the abolitionists of this country. They were angry at the depraved institution of slavery. It was righteous anger that brought those women together at Seneca Falls to begin the women's empowerment movement. They were angry about the patriarchy that was oppressing them in every way. It was righteous anger that fueled the trade union movement. Righteous anger fueled the civil rights movement. Righteous anger is a good thing.
Right.
What's particularly beautiful about righteous anger, because it requires action, when you begin to engage in that action towards justice, you discover joy and you transform the emotion altogether. It's kind of an amazing phenomenon. And not only does it become joyful, or at least in my experience, it has become joyful, I am also put in contact with other human beings who are committed to peace and justice and democracy and ecology, and it becomes really a beautiful community of people, and we begin the process of discovering one another and discovering the best elements of ourselves and humanity. So by engaging in the process of demanding justice is a very powerful thing. And folks, I can also stand before you and say I'm a proud, patriotic, but sad American, because I can remember a time in my life when I could say I was a proud and patriotic American and I didn't need any other qualifier. And for me personally, that's when I was a little boy. When I was taught that I was from the United States of America, and that the United States of America was the land of the free and the home of the brave, but more importantly, the United States of America stood for liberty and justice and equality. And I was so proud of that. And I was so proud to be an American. And not only that, I was taught that the United States of America was like some great shining light on the hill. And we were going to guarantee liberty and justice and equality to the entire world. I was so proud of that. And I'm angry and I'm sad because I grew up and realized I had been lied to. But you know what? Lying, that's a strong word. So instead, let's say I grew up and realized I had been subjected to a creation myth. And the reason I want to temper that description and call it a creation myth instead is, you see, I have a voice that I can associate that story with. I have a name. I have a face that I can conjure. And that face, that name is Mrs. Armstrong. She was my 5th grade teacher. Are there any current, future, or former public school teachers in this crowd? Can we get you to raise your hand, please? Can we now get a round of applause for everyone? I ask for this round of applause for public school teachers everywhere I go for 2 reasons. Number 1, I don't think we thank public school teachers often enough in this country. We damn sure don't pay you enough money. But the second reason that I ask for that round of applause is in honor of Mrs. Armstrong. See, Mrs. Armstrong did not go to bed at night saying, "Mwah! I can't wait till these little children come into my classroom. I'll fill their mind full of lies and propaganda." No. Mrs. Armstrong was a public school teacher, and like every public school teacher I've ever had the honor of meeting, She became a public teacher because she wanted to nurture children to become productive members of society. You see, for Mrs. Armstrong, being a public teacher was a noble calling. It was almost a responsibility to her. So she was not lying to us. Mrs. Armstrong taught the creation myth because she believed it. And that creation myth worked on me, it worked on my classmates, and as I'm watching how most of you are reacting to me right now, it worked on most of you. It works on us because we want to believe it. You see, we want to live in liberty, justice, and equality. That's our birthright. And I'll go further, we deserve it as a birthright. And may I say that we want and deserve liberty, justice, and equality not because we are Americans. We want and deserve liberty, justice, and equality because we're human beings. And you bet American children want and deserve liberty, justice, and equality, and so do Iraqi children, and Afghan children, and Palestinian children, and Israeli children, and Mexican children, and Senegalese children. See, the point I'm making is that, which I mentioned, by the way, but going even deeper, what I'm suggesting is the creation myth that I was taught. The reason that it was so inspirational was because those are descriptions of human values. And if we really are going to both open our minds and open our hearts and imagine the ability to really transform not just this country but the world to be the place that it can be, we're going to actually have to come to terms with the fact that nation states and nation boundaries are not enough. That we need a bigger picture. We need a bigger vision, a human rights vision. And it's possible. And if you don't believe it's possible, may I suggest, take a look at North Africa, take a look at what's happening in the Middle East, take a look at what's happening in Latin America. And frankly, folks, what you'll see there are broad and deep social movements that are active, taking themselves seriously, and engaging not only in social movements, but electoral politics that are calling for systemic transformational changes. And we could do it here too. And I recognize that what I'm describing is going to require a lot of work. It's going to require the same work that the abolitionists did, the women's suffrage movement did, the trade union movement did, the civil rights movement did. See, I use all of those movements as examples for a couple of reasons. Number one, they are historically, they happened, they won, and because it calls to us the best historic legacy of the United States. And I recognize that in order for us to do this, we're going to have to learn to be very persuasive, not just with each other, but as we go out into our communities, talking to family members, friends, other members that we come in contact with. We need to learn to be very persuasive. And what's interesting, we don't have to actually persuade them that change is needed. Polling data shows that actually almost all Americans, regardless of ideology or political party affiliation, do not like what's currently happening. See, we don't have to convince them that we need change. What we have to do is persuade them that they can actually win what they want, which is kind of an interesting kind of challenge as a persuasive challenge. But we have to be persuasive, and since we're going to need to be persuasive, I want to share with you something that I knew intuitively as a trial lawyer, but now scientists are proving beyond a shadow of a doubt. And that is this. If you really want to be persuasive, facts don't matter so much. Man, some of you may know I'm referring to the work of cognitive scientist George Lakoff and some of his colleagues. And I will tell you, the first time I came across that, I thought, oh no. See, I've invested a lot of time and energy in learning facts. You know, and I thought that, well, if you just sort of present those facts as lucidly and cogently as possible, that the facts alone will persuade people. But, and I will admit, folks, that I use that quip as a bit of a humor. Lakoff would say, of course facts matter, but what Lakoff says is, facts alone are not persuasive. We don't understand the world through just the application of facts. We understand the world through the stories we tell each other. And as stories continue to be told over and over again, they begin to create a cultural story that we all kind of share, basically. And then, anytime you have a new fact to present, one processes that new fact in light of the pre-existing story of how you understand the world to operate. That's actually how this operates, right? That's how we, as human beings operate. And so, since we want to be persuasive, we know that stories are how we make sense of the world. I'm going to tell a story. I'm going to tell a story on how it came to be that large transnational corporations are not just exercising power today. I'm going to tell a story on how it came to be that large transnational corporations are ruling us. Corporate CEOs, unelected and basically unaccountable, are basically making the fundamental public policy decisions that affect all of our lives. Corporate CEOs already decided what your transportation choices are going to be. Corporate CEOs already decided how much health care you're going to get, or for most of us, how much we won't get, even if we need it. Corporate CEOs are deciding the fundamental decisions about how much poison will be in the air that we're breathing or the water that we're drinking. Corporate CEOs are basically running this country. And we, the people, are left to choose between paper or plastic at the grocery store. We get to choose between Coke and Pepsi. We can choose between 17 different flavors of ice cream, actually 31. The point is that we are inundated with consumer choices, provided you have the money to pay, which is another kind of interesting thing about that. But I just want to be clear, I am very happy to have consumer choices, but don't mistake a consumer choice with political power. It's not the same thing. And for some folks who try to tell us that because we have consumer choices that somehow we're free, somehow we're living in a democratic republic, it's not true. It's not the same thing. And so, another way to think about this, folks, and now the Texan's going to get metaphysical on y'all, so hold on. Y'all ready? We are all jointly participating in creating our collective reality. Another way to say that is, if enough people think that something is true, if enough people act like it's true, it's true. I mean, this is really kind of an amazing thing, and that's how stories that we tell each other begin to solidify and become reality. So stories matter, and in the story I'm about to tell, we're going to make sure to cover 4 concepts that are very important. The first concept I want to make sure that we cover is the word democracy. That word is very important, so to make sure we've got some common understanding, may I ask, what language is the word democracy derived?
Greek.
It's from Greek. Let's break it down. Demos means
People.
the people. Kratia means rule or govern. So literally the word democracy means the people rule. Quick pop quiz. How many folks believe we the people are actually ruling in the United States? Don't be shy. Look around. I'm not joking. Look at this crowd. There is not a single hand in the air. Folks, I do this presentation all across the country. Last year, I did it 150 times. I'm on track to do it again, that many, probably more. And I ask that question everywhere I go, and almost nobody raises their hand. And my friends, that is a problem. But saying it another way, I would say it's a good thing. It's not a good thing that we, the people, are not ruling, but I think it's a good thing that nobody's raising their hand to that question anymore. I actually think it's a good thing that we're being honest enough, that we're being courageous enough to actually acknowledge what is a very painful reality for us, and that is the country that we thought we had, the country that we were taught that we have, we don't actually have it. It's been a facade. There is, in fact, a ruling elite that are actually in control of most of these decisions. You know, the curtain has been pulled back for most of us, and we're coming to terms with that. And it takes a certain amount of courage to actually acknowledge that something that you believed in is not actually the way it operates. And it's a good thing that we're being courageous enough to confront that so that we can do something about it. And that'll bring me to my next topic, which is sovereignty. And folks, if I just had the word the sovereign on the board, who or what would you think of? Quick, the sovereign. King. Almost every one of you, that's the word that'll pop immediately into our minds. The sovereign king. That's because the word sovereignty means the authority to rule And 500 years ago, the king was the sovereign was the king. Those words became synonymous, and the cultural story that is just part of the background for all of us helps us to facilitate thinking, if you hear the sovereign, you think the king. And my friends, where, by the way, did the king claim his authority to rule? God. God. You don't get more legitimate. It's a big deal, right? In fact, to really underscore this, we're going to do a quick little exercise together. This exercise is always a lot of fun for me. You'll see. I will invite this assembled congregation to please close your eyes for a moment and repeat after me. David Cobb is the king. I told y'all this was fun for me. I didn't go over so well, so I'll try another one. And therefore, David is our ruler. And everything he says must be obeyed without question. Okay, so now is the part where I would normally say, okay, open your eyes. But to your credit, Tucson, Arizona, nobody's eyes are closed. Good on you. The second thing I'll observe, though, is that you did what every other crowd does, and that is as soon as you realized what I was asking you to say, you all laughed at me. You notice that? It was like this collective chuckle or guffaw. Everybody laughed at that. You know why you laughed? Well, because it's funny. I mean, and not funny as in, oh, David has just made a very witty and droll comment. No, it wasn't that sophisticated. If you ask any comedian who sort of studies the comedy as art form and practices it, she or he will tell you, well, yeah, David, you just used absurd humor. You said something so absurd that the folks just laughed at you because there's no other possible reaction. I mean, to say that I get to tell you how you live your life because of who my parents are, or even better, that I get to tell all of you how to live your life. And in fact, I get to say how society itself will be organized because of the divine right of kings. Of course you laugh at that. That's absurd. That's ridiculous. That's hilarious. And 500 years ago, people just like you, and you, and you, and you, and me, and you, we all said it and believed it. I want to ask you to take a moment, just a sober moment really, and think about the implications of that, because frankly, the question of sovereignty and who gets the authority to rule, what are the decision-making protocols, that may be one of the most important decisions that any people makes for itself. And you know, it's true, I'm a Green Party member, and I'm proud of that, but I'm equally proud that I work very closely in coalition with progressive Democrats on a day-in, day-out basis. I personally brought Progressive Democrats of America into the Move to Amend coalition. I'm proud of that coalition work. I'll also tell you this. On civil liberties issues, I am often working with Republicans and Libertarians on fights for civil liberties. I've worked in coalition with socialists and anarchists. You know, I have a long history of working in coalition with people who I may not agree with on everything, but if I can find enough common ground, I'll work with them. I say that not so you'll pat me on the head. I say that so you'll appreciate what I mean when I say, in my 25 years of efforts at social change, I've never had the privilege or the opportunity to work in coalition with a monarchist. And 500 years ago, that's all there were. And 500 years is the blink of an eye in human history. And so when people tell me, oh, we can't amend the Constitution, it's too hard. Or when they say, we can't actually start ending these imperialistic wars for oil because the energy corporations are too powerful, or when they tell us that we can't go up against the pharmaceutical corporations or the healthcare industry to guarantee single-payer healthcare as a fundamental human right. When they tell us that we can't do these things, I think to myself, have you not been paying attention? Throughout all of world history, throughout all of U.S. history, the record is replete with profound changes in social, structural institutions, shifting of power. The only thing that needs to change is for people to think differently and act differently. And frankly, if it is true that we live in a racist, sexist, and class-oppressive society, and we do, then perhaps we really ought to start to think and act differently. Perhaps we ought to take it, perhaps we ought to actually act like the question is as serious as we say it is. Perhaps we ought to act like we're in a crisis. Because you know what? We are. But not to be alarmed because we are in a crisis, but I'm reminded that the symbol in the Chinese language for crisis is also the symbol for another word. Opportunity. And that is really the case. I actually think, that reminds me of another Chinese curse. May you live in interesting times. Congratulations, folks. You are cursed or blessed to live in very interesting times. We are all cursed and blessed to be living in a moment of crisis that's also a moment of opportunity for deep, profound transformation if we're just willing to begin acting on it. And that's going to take me to the next topic, and that's legal personhood. Please note that I didn't write corporate personhood on the board, because at this point, I want us to actually come to understand that the concept of legal personhood in this context means the ability to assert rights. And since we're talking in this case about legal personhood, we're talking about the ability to assert rights under law. And saying it that way, it's obvious, isn't it, that the question of who is a legal person has been one of the profound questions that had to be answered not only in this society, but every society, but especially in the United States. The question of who gets to be a legal person is, in one respect, the entire history of the United States. This matters. Who gets to assert rights under law matters a great deal, and the ruling elite have always fought over that. The last concept that we're going to cover is the word corporation. Since that word is equally important, I'm going to ask the same question. What language does the word corporation derive? Latin. It's from Latin. Let's break it down. Corpus means body. And now for extra credit points, the suffix T-I-O-N? It means to have or create. Nicely done. So literally the word corporation would mean to have or create body. And in this sense I mean literally physical body. And that's because we are taught in law school. And by the way, are there any lawyers in the crowd besides me and Bill? Come on, it's a friendly crowd. I see another hand in the air. All right, Claudia. So I'll ask Bill, I'll ask Claudia. Do you remember, like I do, being taught that a corporation is a legal fiction? Yes. Claudia says yes. I've lost track of Bill. Yes. Yes. So Bill says yes. So watch this. Even if you weren't subjected to law school, and believe me, it is being subjected to a process, but even if you weren't subjected to law school, if you've heard that, even if you couldn't precisely define it, if you've heard that a corporation is a legal fiction, please raise your hand. Look at all those hands go up. So corporation is legal fiction, corporation is legal fiction, it's a legal fiction, it's a legal fiction. A corporation is a legal fiction. That begs the question, what does the word fiction mean? Made up. Made up. Not true. That's what it means. And so, in law school we are taught a corporation doesn't actually exist in the real world, but we'll make it up. We'll pretend like this group of people and resources and contractual obligations and cultural assumptions. I mean, it's a very complex, very sophisticated abstraction, but we're going to pretend like it's a certain thing so that we can, a physical thing, so that we can treat it a certain way under law. And remember, if enough people think that something is true, if enough people act like it's true, poof, we can create a corporation. The point is, a corporation is a construct. And it's constructed, it's a social construct, and it gets constructed for a reason. And the word corporation is from Latin because the first corporations ever created by the genius of human creativity were actually created during the Roman Republic. Not, by the way, during the Roman Empire. And sometimes I wish we spent more time asking, what happens when a republic devolves into an empire? Because that might be an important conversation in the United States. Just saying. But the Romans created this construct known as the corporation for a reason. For example, y'all heard the phrase, all roads lead to Rome? Yeah, of course, here it is. 2,000 years later, we still say that. Well, check it out. That road system was actually built and maintained as a Roman corporation. Likewise, the aqueduct system, that amazing bit of engineering that actually moved water all all across the Italian peninsula without electricity. Quick parenthetical here. One of the things that fills me with such great joy and hope and optimism is the absolute knowledge that human beings are incredibly clever. We are so smart. And in fact, you can't name a problem that I can't, within 15 minutes and access to an internet connection, tell you the solution. That, of course, that internet connection is important because I need that, because I'm not saying I have the solution, but I'm saying that collectively there is a problem, or there is a solution to every single problem. The reality is we don't have the political will and ability to implement the solution. So our problems are actually, in one sense, all political problems. Now, back to the aqueduct system, though. That aqueduct system, that very complex system, was actually conceived of, built, maintained, and operated as a Roman corporation. Likewise, the first universities, the first hospitals. Can you guess? Corporation, corporation. So, quick pop quiz. What does a road system, a water system, a university, a hospital, what do they all have in common?
Serve the public.
They all serve the public. Everything that I've just described are, in essence, public goods or utilities. The genius of the corporation is to take private money, material, and resources and put it to a public use. But there's another way the government takes private money and puts it to public use. That's taxes. And I'm not going to denigrate taxes. I think taxes are a very important thing. But the difference, taxes are mandatory. I mean, when the tax person shows up, does she or he tell you, hey, it's tax time, would you maybe be willing to pay a little bit? Not in my experience. And it wasn't the Roman experiences either. The centurion showed up with a spear. Mandatory, pay up. The genius of the corporation is that you take this private money, material, and resources and you organize it on a voluntary basis. And in modern times, if I say, hey, I've got a great idea, would you please just make a donation to this idea? That is, and we're gonna organize a bunch of people to do stuff. That is, in essence, what we would think of as a nonprofit corporation. Or I might say, I've got this great idea, it's going to make a lot of money. So but I don't have enough capital to actually do it. So if you'll actually invest some money in my great idea, I anticipate returning your money to you with a profit, a return on your investment. And in modern times, we think of that as a for-profit corporation. But the really important part of both of these at one level, conceptually, is that they are not coercive. I'm trying to entice or convince people to do it. It's a voluntary exchange. Saying it this way, isn't it obvious that why I say I'm not anti-corporation? I think corporations are very important concepts. This is a very good idea. And historically, corporations have been used for very important reasons, and even today, there are many corporations that I think are fantastic examples of how to actually organize capital to do useful things and to help things to happen. But let's just be honest, folks. This is not exactly how the modern mega transnational corporation operates at all, is it? No. That's because the modern transnational corporation, the huge mega corporations of the day, actually come out of the 14th and 15th century of Europe. You know, the age of discovery. I have to put discovery in my little imaginary quotation marks, right? Because after all, what did the Europeans discover in the 14th and 15th century? Africa, Asia, later North and South America. Newsflash, there were people living there. They weren't lost. They didn't need to be discovered. And so, in the same spirit of truth-telling, in the same spirit of being courageous, to be willing to confront reality, let's just confront the reality of the 14th and 15th century. It wasn't the age of discovery at all. It was the age of rape and pillage and plunder and murder. For me, there's one word that sums that up. It's the age of imperialism. And see, that's what imperialism means. It means beating people down. It means stealing from them. It means killing them. It means taking their things and pretending like and making it up as if it's yours and that you have some sort of right to it. Imperialism is ugly. It's brutal. It's horrific. And the modern transnational corporation, as we understand it, didn't just accidentally get created during the time period of empire. The modern transnational corporation was created intentionally and deliberately as an instrument of empire. In fact, they weren't called originally corporations during this time period. They were called joint stock companies. And in fact, one of the very early joint stock companies was known as the East India Company. Ah, you've heard of it. Literally designed to subjugate the entire subcontinent of India. An entire subcontinent, to conquer the entire peoples, to destroy the existing institutions that they had that were meeting their needs, the autonomous decision-making processes, their sovereignty, to shred it, to disregard it, and then not only destroy their existing institutions, but to create new institutions, forcing those people to create social structures that would help to facilitate the stealing of their own resources so that they could be sent back as profits to the shareholders of the joint stock company. Not only to colonize and to force those people to begin to tell new cultural stories. See, that's how colonizing works. That's how imperialism works. It doesn't just colonize your body, it colonizes your mind. And I think part of the problem today, folks, we are colonized in the United States.
Yeah.
Here. And another of those early joint stock companies, by the way, was known as the Africa Trading Company. Would anybody like to guess what the Africa Trading Company traded? Folks, I'm going to use myself as an example because I think it's important that we be honest. And as a white person, I think that it's important to actually acknowledge and understand and have the courage to actually say out loud this very difficult thing. And that is, see, I ask the question, right? I know the answer. And I do this presentation all across the country. I ask the question all the time. And I'll tell you that the word that pops into my head, if I'm not being really clear about it, but unbidden to me, the word slaves pops into my head. Because after all, I was taught about the Africa slave trade. I was actually taught even about Harriet Tubman, the great runaway slave, and how wonderful it was that she helped other runaway slaves escape. And so I was taught all about this. See, that word was used over and over again. But now that I'm making such a big deal about that word, here's a follow-up question. In the 14th and 15th century, was Africa populated by slaves? Africa was populated by people. Africa was populated by people. And may I say, with some trepidation, but with conviction, Africa was populated by people who were basically just like me. Now, I say that with full awareness of my skin color and my pigment. I'm not stupid. I know I'm a white person. But I say it with conviction because you ask any scientist, you ask any biologist, and she or he will tell you race does not exist. I mean, sure, skin color and pigment exist. Ethnicity exists. But you know what? So does hair color and eye color and height differential. You know, all sorts of different little things like that. Fairly trivial physical distinctions exist, but no scientist would ever elevate any of those to a classification or a taxonomy. So scientifically, objectively, without a doubt, race doesn't exist. But check this out. Racism damn sure does. How can that possibly be? Oh yes, if enough people think that something is true, if enough people act like it's true, it's true. Proof. Race can be created as a construct because it is a social construct. And may I say, race got created for a reason, the same way the corporation got created as a construct for a reason, and that reason was to justify slavery. And I'm not saying that either the corporations created slavery, because slavery had pre-existed that. But I'm saying the justification for it, because you see, pre-race and pre the joint stock companies, there was a different kind of phenomenon going on. Let's say, Paul, can I use you as an example? I'm going to use Paul as an example. Let's say that Paul and I live in different tribes. There's a river that separates Paul's tribe from my tribe, and my tribe goes to war against Paul's tribe, and my tribe wins this war. And by the way, why do you think my tribe might win this war? What are some reasons why one tribe might win a war against another tribe? Better weapons. More people. You know, those are the two that pop mostly into most people's heads, the quickest ones. Better weapons, more people. But I haven't given you enough background or enough facts to know why my tribe wins the war against Paul's tribe. I haven't given you enough background. So shall I tell you why my tribe wins the war against Paul's tribe? Yes. Because I'm telling the story. See how important stories are? More importantly, see how important it is that we ask not only who is telling the story, but what is their motivation. That matters too. Unfortunately for you, Paul, I am telling the story. So my tribe wins the war against Paul's tribe. I put my spear up against Paul's throat and I say, Paul, you're my slave. Now, in this scenario, what is the philosophical, intellectual justification for David to enslave Paul?
The spear.
The spear. Right? There is no, another way to say it is, there is no real intellectual or philosophical justification. And check it out. In the 14th and 15th century is also the beginning of what now we know of as the Age of Enlightenment, when it became sort of necessary to begin to create philosophical understandings and reasons and rationales for institutions. And as stupid as it is, race got created to justify the concept that you could actually subjugate and enslave somebody over something as trivial as pigment. The point I'm making, racism, corporatism, and militarism are inextricably linked concepts. And what links them? Oppression and exploitation. And frankly, folks, I'm not the first American to say that. Because one of the great American orators of all time said basically the same thing in what I believe was his best political speech. Wasn't this fellow's most famous speech? Because his most famous speech is known as, I Have a Dream. What am I talking about? Martin Luther King Jr., of course. And that's a beautiful speech. In fact, it's a brilliant speech. And if you haven't heard it, and I mean not just read it, but heard it, do yourself a favor. Get a copy of it and listen to it. It's like a song or like an epic poem. It's uplifting, it's beautiful, it's powerful, it deserves to be heard. But honestly, that is not King's best political speech. Because for my money, King's best political speech was not delivered in Washington, D.C. King's best political speech was actually delivered in Harlem, specifically at the Riverside Church. I see some of you know this speech. It's known as Beyond War or Beyond Vietnam. And in that speech, King said, the United States of America is suffering from a spiritual and moral decay. Now this is, King is a reverend, right? This is strong language for a man of faith. Suffering from a spiritual and moral decay that he says is a result of the triple evils. Again, strong language. The triple evils of racism, militarism, and extreme materialism, or just old-fashioned greed. And King said the United States of America can't become the country that we want it to be. King said the United States can't become the country that we deserve it to be. King said we can't become the country that God intends us to be unless and until we address those exploitive practices in our culture, in our politics, in our economics. And you know what? King was right. He was right then, and he's right now. And since I finally got around to America in my little story, here's a question. How many colonies in the founding of the United States of America? Folks, this is a gimme. So I think everybody knows it. I'm going to ask the question again. How many colonies in the founding of the United States of America? 13. That's an easy one. So here's the real question. Of those 13 colonies, how many of them were corporations? Nicely done. It was a trick question. The answer, I think, is all of them. Because it took the king to create the body of each of those colonies. Now, somebody in the crowd might still be sort of fooled by my trickery and say, no, the king didn't create Massachusetts. Massachusetts was already there. But that's why it's a trick question. You see, the land was there. The people who lived on the land. The forest and the rivers and the streams and the deer, you know, physical reality was clearly there, but it took the king to create Massachusetts. And the king created Massachusetts by the use of a very specific legal instrument. Do you know what that instrument is called? Charter. Nicely done. It's called a charter. And to illustrate how the king would create an actual whole body out of nothing more than his authority and power, we'll do another quick little exercise together. In this exercise, I'll be the king, Can anybody guess why I might be the king in this exercise? Because I'm still telling the story. See how important? I'm telling you, it matters. Now, though, Paul, it'd be good to sit where you sit. I'm going to make you a governor. Watch this. I, the king, with all political power, which, by the way, can only come from you, ultimately, but I am the king, with all power, will now create Massachusetts with the use of my power and nothing more than a writing instrument and paper to write on. And, of course, as I create this new entity, I'm not going to bother with the day-to-day affairs and administration of Massachusetts. After all, I'm the king. I've got other people to rape and pillage and plunder, which apparently are kingly duties. So instead, I will assign a royal governor. And now, my friends, I will quote from the actual charter that created Massachusetts. We'll create Massachusetts, but now we'll assign a royal governor and assign the royal governor the task and responsibility to plant, to rule, and to govern the new entity known as Massachusetts to benefit me, the king, and to benefit the shareholders of the joint stock company known as the Massachusetts Bay Trading Company. Massachusetts began as a for-profit corporation just as surely as the East India Company did. The province and Rhode Island plantation was how Rhode Island began. Virginia began as the Virginia Company. Georgia was a penal corporation. Quick pop quiz. What skin pigment or skin color do you think the original slaves that actually worked the Georgia Penal Corporation had? White. I'm telling you folks, this whole notion of the construct of whiteness is something that deserves a little more time and a little more exploration. It actually starts to expose how the ruling elite create all kinds of constructs to fool us into keeping us from working together. The point is that the king created each one of those through a charter and then assigned a royal governor to plant, rule, and govern. That's actually from the actual charter creating Massachusetts. So, my friends, another way to think of Paul in current contemporary times, we wouldn't call him a royal governor. Instead, we would call him what? The CEO, right? I mean, that's what I've kind of described. Another way to say it, folks, is the American revolutionaries were not calling for a more socially responsible king or more socially responsible CEOs. Maybe today we can do better too. Right? Maybe we can raise our aspirations a little higher. We come from better stock, quite frankly. We come from a better historic legacy than to just beg for something a little more scraps or a little less oppression. But let me tell you something, folks. It's worth looking into because about 10 years before the American Revolution actually erupted and flared, those same people who would become revolutionaries, about 10 years before that, they were writing letters to the king that went like this. "Oh, Father King, we, your humble children, come before you on bended knee to ask that you intervene on our behalf. Your royal governor is administering unfair laws, laws written by the English Parliament that are benefiting the East India Company over us, good English subjects." Quick parenthetical question. What percentage of the English Parliament writing those laws do you think owned shares in the East India Company at this time? All of them. 100%. I wonder if that matters. "Oh, Father King, we, your humble and obedient children, come before you to beg that you assist us and help us, O mighty one." It was the most sniveling, groveling language you can imagine. And I don't know about you, but I am keenly interested in asking myself, what kind of stories were they telling each other? What changed for them? How did they start to think about themselves and each other that convinced them to stop the boot kissing, to stop begging and pleading for scraps and some changes, that actually convinced them to stand up, to put their shoulders back, to look directly at the king. You know, the king who had cultural authority from God, or so they had been taught, and behind the king to see the most powerful military the world had ever assembled and said, "You're done, get out, we're going to do it different now." Because let me tell you something, folks, that process I just described, that is magic. And I want to be clear, if one person stands up against oppression and injustice, that is a beautiful thing. That is a courageous thing that deserves our appreciation, our applause, our acknowledgement. But if one person stands up against injustice and oppression, that is not magic. The magic can only be invoked when one person stands up and somebody to her left stands up and somebody to her right stands up, and you get this whole collective action of standing up together. And at this point, may I just say, may the goddess bless the Occupy movement. There is something magical about the Occupy movement on so many different fronts. And, you know, I believe that we have to be critical of, and not in an ugly way, but we need to be constructively critical of strategies that we do and others do. And so I'll now share with you that, you know, I have a long history of work in social change. And one of the areas where I felt like we were really doing some good work was during the late 90s, mid to late 1990s, the global justice movement. In fact, some of you may have heard when me and about 40,000 of my closest friends held a little party in Seattle, Washington in November of 1999. Maybe, did anybody go to that party? Anybody know what I'm talking about? The World Trade Organization, right? And so you were there, brother. Felt good, right? It was wonderful. And what was happening then during that whole time period? We decided anytime the ruling elite meet to make decisions that impact the rest of us without our input, we're going to meet to protest and expose it. And so we met in Seattle of 1999 and we protested what they were doing. And when the World Bank met, to make decisions for us, we met to protest them. When the International Monetary Fund met, we met to protest it, to expose it. And I'm proud of that work, right? I'm not going to just denigrate myself. I'm proud that I was doing that. And frankly, we made some dope puppets. You know, we introduced, you know, art and puppetry into social movements and political work that had been lost for some time. So we did some great work, but I'm also going to point out one of our deficiencies. See, when the ruling elite were meeting to make decisions to impose their will on the rest of us, we were meeting to protest and expose them. But when the ruling elites left, so did we. And I have to tell you, some genius said, I can't help but to notice that there's a place where the ruling elite are meeting all the time. It's called Wall Street. Let's go there. Oh, and by the way, they don't ever seem to leave, so we're not going to leave. Oh, and by the way, you don't have to come to Wall Street to join this movement. You can occupy wherever you live, work, and play. Occupy public space wherever you are. And the third thing that's genius about the Occupy movement is deeper still. They're not just challenging us to occupy public space. The Occupy movement challenges us, dares us, invites us to occupy imagination space. Something is very important going on in this country. And make no mistake about it, that's the reason that the ruling elite, when they realized what was happening, did everything they could to shut it down. And I'm here to tell you, it's not shut down. Just because we're not in public space and encampments doesn't mean that this movement is not still moving. And I also want to use this opportunity to let you know, if you haven't heard yet, that in that same, I got to tell you, the Occupy folks really understand story and how to contextualize it in so many ways, because I have been invited and Move to Amend has been invited, and I think we may be one of the only organizations invited to something that many Occupies across the country have now endorsed and called for, and that is an Occupy National Gathering. And this Occupy National Gathering is to be held on July 4th. And not only that, where might it be? Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Dang, these people are smart. So, if anybody's interested, go to the Occupy National Gathering, or go to Occupy Together. And if you're interested, you know, maybe you can get a bus to go out. And if not, tell your friends and family members who are nearby. Let's converge on Philadelphia on July 4th in strength, like the powerful social movement that we really are. Now, folks, we know that the king ultimately does get kicked out. So a new charter gets constructed, a new charter gets written, a new legal instrument. This legal instrument is the instrument that is also known as the supreme law of the land. What's that called? The U.S. Constitution. How many people here have read the U.S. Constitution? Raise your hand. All right, good. A lot of people, so that means you can grade my papers. Y'all see if I get this more or less right, because I'm going to tell you, when you read the Constitution in its entirety, not just read the individual words, but read it and understand the pattern. As my mama would say, son, step back from the fabric. See the whole thing. See how it relates to one another. What you'll see when you do that is that the U.S. Constitution describes two basic actors. The first actor is the most important actor. In fact, it's so important, it's the first three words. We the people. Folks, those are hallowed words in this country, and they should be. Because you see, we the people come together to create the second actor, which is government itself. Here's something to observe. Just saying it that way, we the people create government. Government is also a construct. We construct it. It's ours. That's kind of an important way to think about it. So it doesn't really make sense to denigrate government, because we're just denigrating our collective selves. We the people in this document are described as being free and sovereign. And what does the word sovereign mean again? The authority to rule. The king is not sovereign. We kicked his butt out. But frankly, neither is government sovereign. In fact, government is subordinate and accountable. Government is subordinate to whom? The people. Government is accountable to whom? The people. It's got a ring to it, doesn't it? I like how this is going. Let's continue. We the people are free and sovereign because we the people have rights. Government doesn't have rights. Government only has duties. I want to stop for a moment and, as a lawyer, really direct your attention to this concept. Having a right is a powerful thing. If I have the right to do something, it means I can do it, and I don't need your permission. I don't need the group's permission. I don't need the city of Tucson's permission. I don't need the state's permission. I don't need the federal government's permission. Man, I'm from Texas. I don't need my mama's permission. Well, I mean, if any of you know my mama, don't tell her I said that. Let's say I don't need her permission. But the point is, rights are sacred. The Constitution doesn't create rights. The Constitution recognizes rights. Another way to say it is, and y'all don't get alarmed, this is just going to be one button. In the back, can y'all see this? If you can, I'm pointing at my belly button. And if you're too shy to check here in this public place, please go home tonight and make sure you have one. Because if you do, you also have rights that are sacred and sacrosanct. And the point is, folks, government does not have rights. Government only has duties. And government never has rights over the people. Having constitutional rights is a very powerful concept. And where do these government duties come from? Why, remember, all power resides with the people. That's a very important idea. The people have the power. And in any political jurisdiction, the people hold the authority and the political power. That is absolutely true. And by the way, quick pop quiz, what is the population, more or less, of the city of Tucson, Arizona? 1 million? Yeah. Wow. Okay, 1 million. I will celebrate the fact that there are 1 million people in Tucson, Arizona who actually hold all the political power. But let me tell you something. I don't want to go to the meeting of 1 million people where we make decisions on where to put stop signs. And I like political meetings. I'm not going to that one. Anybody here want to facilitate a meeting of 1 million people? You're either a visionary or a fool, sir. Maybe both. Maybe both. He already said both. He's both. But all I'm getting at is, we the people collectively hold all the political power, but we appropriately delegate a certain amount of power to government. How much power do we delegate to government? Only enough to perform the duties that we assign them. We don't give all of our power to government. We don't even give a majority of our power to government. We only give government a limited amount of our collective power to assign them the task to perform duties. And how does the government discharge these duties? By writing laws that are in the public interest. And those laws in the public interest are subject to political debate and discourse. Absolutely. To be sure, that is true. However, the one thing that no government public law can ever do is actually violate anybody's private rights. Oh my God, wait a minute. Mrs. Armstrong may have been right. We the people are free and sovereign. We hold all the political power. We delegate a certain amount of our power to government. Government that is subordinate and accountable. Government that we will then give a certain amount of our power. Again, this is what limited government means, by the way. Limited only with enough power to perform the duties that we have told them that they will do. Government discharges their duties by writing laws in the public interest that will be debated and so forth. But when they write the laws, that is the public interest. But the one thing that no law can ever do is violate any citizen's actual human rights, because if they do that, then that law should be able to be overturned, because the law that as such is illegitimate because it's infringing upon our constitutional rights. Oh my God, isn't that brilliant? Isn't that beautiful? We should try that in this country. This would work. And I'm not even joking. This is brilliant and this is beautiful, and I'm also not joking that we have never tried it. Because before I go 1 second further waxing poetic about how brilliant and beautiful, because that's the day that the Bill of Rights are actually even part of this Constitution. And so, now though that we know what legal personhood actually means, the ability to assert rights, I have to ask, in 1791, when those Bill of Rights are adopted, who gets to be a legal person that can wrap themselves in the protection of the Bill of Rights? White, male, property owners and landowners. My gosh, that's a lot of restrictions. Another way to understand it, folks, is of the adult human beings actually living in the newly formed United States of America, only 5% could actually even assert rights. We the people only included 5%. Now some folks might, another way to think about this, folks, is as Howard Zinn has said. Probably the most important way Zinn said it, may the goddess rest his soul. Howard Zinn said, to really understand U.S. history, or that story, you need to recognize it as a series of struggles by actual human beings to be defined as persons with rights protected and acknowledged by our Constitution. That's so important, I'm going to say it again. Probably the most important way to really understand the arc of U.S. history is as a series of struggles by actual human beings to be defined as persons with rights protected by our Constitution. Now some folks might say, all right, Cobb, you got a scathing indictment about imperialism 500 years ago, but hey man, women can vote. We got rid of slavery. It's all good now. To which I say, au contraire, mon frere. It ain't all good now. It ain't all good at all. And a big part of the reason it ain't all good is the operation of that dominant institution we've been talking about, the transnational corporation. And so, since we've described how our entire political framework is supposed to operate, it might behoove us to ask, where would a corporation go here? Well, in order to do that, I'll ask this question. What does it take to form a corporation in Arizona today?
Money?
$40. Is the filing fee only $40?
$40.
So $40 filing fee and filling out some paperwork. And as long as you filled out your paperwork correctly and your $40 check clears, do you know what the Secretary of State of Arizona will do? Issue you a charter. You know how long your charter can last in Arizona? Forever. You know what you can do with the corporate charter under Arizona Corporation Code today? All lawful things, anything legally permissible. Some of us observe, well, apparently if you have enough money and wealth and influence, you can do illegal things and get away with it. But the point I'm making is, we don't really even think about the original creation or the concepts of the corporation. They're just ubiquitous. But now I'm going to take you back to 1787, 1789, 1791, and share with you what it took to form a corporation in this country, and for the next 75 to 100 years. First, you had to get a bill introduced in the lower house of your state government, and that bill had to pass by a majority. Then it went to the state Senate, the upper house of the legislative body, and it had to pass by a majority, and then that paperwork had to go to the governor's office, and the governor had to be willing to sign it. Does that sound anything at all like a corporation today? No. No. What does it sound like? What process am I describing? A law. Anybody besides me lobbied to get a state law passed? Am I the only one? All right, so lots of hands go up. So how hard is that? It's, you know what, it's funny, I was in Colorado giving this presentation, and I was very honored, there was a member of the Colorado State Legislature there, and he said, Mr. Cobb, I have to interrupt you, you got it a little bit wrong. See, you're right, it's really hard to get good laws passed, bad laws, quite easy. But what I'm getting at is the mechanics of just getting a charter for a corporation and getting limited liability was a huge mechanic. Like the process was very difficult. And that's just the practical logistics. In fact, the concept, the substance, you had to prove that there was a public need that was not being met by existing practice of business or government. And if you were granted the privilege of limited liability, all you could do was that limited thing. And if you did anything other than that with your business corporate charter, you know what happened to it? It was revoked. They revoked it just for doing something else called ultra vires. Oh, by the way, do you know how long these corporate charters would last? 10 years, 5 years, 20 years, 5, 10, 20 years almost. And no corporation was indefinite. Everyone, the longest they ever lasted was 20 years. And when they expired, if anybody wanted to continue that business, the business could continue. But if you wanted to continue with the privilege of limited liability, you had to apply all over again, prove the public need was still there, etc., etc. And by the way, folks, even if you were doing the specific thing that you had been granted your corporate charter to do, even if you were within the very limited time that you were allowed to exist, if you ever did anything to violate the public interest or the public trust, do you know what happened to your corporate charter? Revoked. Corporate charters were routinely revoked in this country for the first 75 or 100 years. Now, my friends, I'm not telling you that that was the land of milk and honey. Of course not. Slavery existed. Racism was real and endemic. The patriarchy was oppressive. Workers were being systematically abused. But what I am telling you is that the corporation as an instrument, as a construct, was appropriately democratically controlled. That's our history. This is not just my wishful thinking about how to deal with the corporation. This is our historic legacy. And I challenge you to ask today, of the modern, huge Fortune 500 corporations, is there even a single one that would be allowed to exist today if we had that level of control? Surely many small, even mid-sized corporations that employ 20, 30, 50, 100 people would still be able to exist. But the huge transnational corporation couldn't even exist in their current form. Certainly couldn't do what they're currently doing if we actually had those. And so now, folks, since we understand that it takes an action of state government to create a corporate charter, we know that that corporate charter can be used to hold the corporation subordinate and accountable. We know that the corporate charter describes the duties of what a corporation can or cannot do. And as I will say, a corporation should only be allowed to exist if it at least is serving the public interest, or at least not harming the public interest. Isn't it just obvious that a corporation should go on this side of the line? Isn't that just self-evident? And so now, folks, I thank you for your patience, because here's the punchline. When the U.S. Supreme Court, scratch that, when 5 members of the U.S. Supreme Court come waltzing in, and in an act of supreme judicial activism, says, even though the word corporation is never used in our Constitution, 5 of us are going to tell 300 million of you that you have to politically, legally treat a corporation as if it's a person with rights protected by the Constitution. It perverts this entire framework. See, corporate personhood is not just an illogical idea, which it is. Corporate personhood is not just a stupid idea, which it is. Corporate personhood is a linchpin for how the ruling elite have stolen our authority to govern ourselves. lawyer and as a proud and patriotic American, what really pisses me off is that they use our legal system to justify it. Because, you know, as a child and as a lawyer, I was taught that you go to the courts for justice. And that justice is blind. And she doesn't care what skin color you have or whether you're a man or a woman or rich or poor. That's what we're taught to believe. And you know what? I believe that. And I still want that to be true. And it pisses me off that they not only are raping and pillaging the planet, which must stop, but they cannot use our legal system to tell us it's legal. It's not.
Yeah.
So, there is movement, my friends, and I think the best example of that movement is move to amend. And what amend what? Why the U.S. Constitution, to make it clear that we demand to abolish corporate personhood. This is also known sometimes as the well duh constitutional amendment. And I want to be clear, what that means again, folks, this is a shorthand, and it's a great shorthand because it's a great meme. But really what it means is abolish the court-created legal doctrine that a corporation has inherent and inalienable constitutional rights. Because if, like, you have constitutional rights, they're not subject to the political process, which means that if there's any law, local, state, or federal, that actually infringes upon your rights, you should be able to go into court and get that law overturned, because that's inappropriate exercise of governmental power. But there it is, folks. It takes an action of the government to create the charter to begin with. Why in the world would we then say that this artificial entity created through that process has any inherent and inalienable constitutional rights? It doesn't. Secondly, our demand to abolish the equally odious, also court-created idea that money equals speech. Because you know what? Money is not speech. Okay. I don't want to do all of the work of amending the Constitution, which needs to be done to properly control the instrument of the corporation, only to be told, oh, but the rich and the powerful can still spend unlimited amounts of money, of their own private money, to completely control the political process. No, no, no. Nor do I want to say, let's just get money out of elections, because then corporations would still be able to overturn environmental protection laws, worker safety laws, public health laws, and other kind of laws. The Move to Amend campaign is a multiracial, multi-ethnic coalition of groups and individuals coming together from across the country who are saying, ya basta, enough already. We, the people, govern. We, the people, rule. We are going to participate in a nonviolent revolution in this country to take our country back. Peace. You've got a great, well-trained dog. So what I'm going to do now is two things. One, could we get those clipboards up to the front? Because for some of you I know have already joined the Move to Amend Coalition. You're already getting stuff from us. And my colleagues were actually collecting signatures up front. But some of you may not have decided that you may not be already involved. So if now we're going to just give you the opportunity and to join. So I will say this, folks: if you don't want to join Move to Amend, like if you're already joined, you don't need to sign at all. So if you can start on this side, brother, and if you'd start on this side at the front, and we'll just go back. So if you want to join, please do. If you don't want to join, like again, if you're already getting stuff from us here, put one here, and that's perfect. If you want to join. If you don't want to join, that's okay. Just pass it. I won't be surprised. If you've already signed it, you don't need to sign it again. Yes, if you already signed online, you don't need to. Yeah, be sure. Sign it again because it'll just kick you out. But I will say this, folks. If you don't want to join, that's okay. Just pass it. I mean, I won't be offended. I'll be surprised. but I won't be offended. But I will say this. If you're going to join, if you're going to sign up here, print legibly. And as an organizer, is there anything more frustrating than not being able to contact somebody who's trying to sign up? And so here's the thing. If, like me, you've got bad handwriting, stop. Slow down. Take your time. We'll all wait. Seriously, so please, as that comes around, we really do want to enjoy this, because you know what? Believe it or not, we've never been covered a single time by the mainstream corporate media. But we've already grown to over 200,000 people and growing. We've got several hundred endorsing organizations, over 100 local affiliates. And you know why? Because of people like, tell me your name again, brother.
John Brakey.
John Brakey behind the camera of what you're watching right now. Because you see, John Brakey has decided not to just hate the media, but to become the media.
That's right.
And now, whoever you are, I haven't had the privilege probably of meeting you in person, but because of John Brakey's work as a citizen media activist, you got a chance to actually hear this conversation. So, this is actually working. We're moving because people like John are actually sharing this information, and now I'm going to say that you and all of you can do the same thing, because even if you are not capable of or have the desire to make videos, you know what you can do? Go to your Facebook account. How many people here have a Facebook account? Look at all those hands go up, put them down. Now watch this. How many of you will use your Facebook account to say, I join and support www.movetoamend.org. You should too. Raise your hand if you'll do that. Honestly. Now here's the thing. If y'all are being honest, if you do that tonight, another probably 3 to 4, maybe 500 people will actually become aware of this movement just from that action if we collectively do it. It's an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing. So now what I want to do is actually invite, if you want to ask a question, make a comment, please raise your hand.